How to photograph your artwork. I know that photographing your work can feel pretty intimidating sometimes. You have to deal with glare, warping, lighting, good quality photos, all those types of things. So there's 3 different lighting setups that you can have to photograph your work. One would be photographing your paintings or drawings outside. Another one would be through a window, a big window with adequate lighting. And 3 would be with studio lights. I photograph my work with studio lights, and the key with that is to have 2 coming at a 45-degree angle towards your work. Daylight bulbs are going to get you the best color. You also want to have your lights diffused. So you could use something like tracing paper or actually like a light box. I use polarizing gels, but all 3 of those options will work. So again, diffused lighting, daylight, and a 45-degree angle in 2 of them. If you don't have access to that, you can photograph outside. I've never done this personally myself, but I know that some artists have had good results. The key is just doing it on an overcast day so that the light is diffused through the clouds. And you want to make sure that, and this goes for when you're using studio lighting or when you're photographing outside or like with a window, you really want to make sure that your painting or drawing or whatever your artwork is, the plane of it is parallel to the lens of the camera. So if you're photographing with like an iPhone or something, that means that when you're looking at your image, each edges of the camera are going to be parallel with the edges of your work, and same goes for top and bottom. With a window, again, you want to make sure it's large enough that you're getting really bright light coming through, but that it's ideally a little more diffused. You don't want direct lighting coming right through. When you have direct lighting coming right through, you're going to have 2 different colors happening and obviously 2 varying degrees of light. So I would suggest maybe a north-facing window. Try it out and see how that works. But that's the 3 ways that you can set up to photograph your work. A tip for no matter what the environment is that you're photographing in is you want to shoot on a tripod, and definitely with a timer. And that's so that you can get a really clear, not shaky, in-focus image. If you're photographing with a DSLR, ideally you'd want to have the settings at like f8, with an ISO at about 100 to 400, 100 getting you the best image, depends on how much light you have. And no flash. Flash is just going to blow out your colors and make it all weird anyways when you've already invested this time in your setting to make sure you're getting a good quality image. I also will autofocus my work. I do this just because then I can really be sure that my work's actually focused on, rather than like pulling up the image on the computer and being like, oh, it's out of focus. Just to recap, f8, ISO 100, no flash, and then you just want to make sure that the meter is right in the middle of that gauge so that you have appropriate light going on. It's also a good idea to leave your camera setup up while you edit your photo so that you make sure that everything's how you want it, so then you don't have to go through the whole situation of resetting up your lighting. You also are going to get a better image if you place your tripod farther away from your painting surface and zoom all the way in. That's going to make it so, again, you just have less warping. You want to have your viewfinder filled completely with the work, so whatever that means for how far back or how close up you need, as long as you can zoom all the way in or almost all the way in, that's going to be ideal. The last setting with a DSLR camera or cameras that have this capability is your white balance. So I always use preset. I'll hold a white piece of paper in front of my lens and photograph that to get the appropriate lighting for the environment. But there's also a few different preset options you can go. And of course, if you're photographing in daylight or with daylight bulbs, you'd want to choose the daylight option for white balance. The dreaded glare. When it comes to glare, there's a few tips that are going to help across the board. Number 1, which I already mentioned a little bit, is going to be making sure your lighting is at a 45-degree angle. If you're in a small space, sometimes this can be a little bit tricky, but just know that your lights can still be close or far away from your artwork. You just want to have that 45-degree, that's key. You also want to try to make sure that you don't have anything that's reflecting back into your camera lens, like a mirror right behind your artwork with your light shining on it, and then that bright light is reflecting back into your lens. So if you do have those things, cover them up, move them, make sure all the other windows, lighting, everything's turned off and closed. The 2 other tips with glare that I have are a little bit camera and budget depending, but they've made my photographing experience so much easier. On my DSLR camera, I have a polarizing filter lens, and you just rotate that to activate it, and you can look through the viewpoint and see when you have glare and shiny objects and when you don't, and obviously you would just do it when you don't have the glare on your image. And then the other one are polarizing filters on my lights. That just diffuses it and makes it so that the image ends up less glary. The last step to get a high quality image of your artwork is going to be editing. So it can be helpful, to like amp up the contrast a little bit or tweak the colors slightly because your camera might not capture exactly the way that it looks in the lighting that you want. So I edit my photos with my screen brightness all the way up. I definitely mess up photos by not doing so. You can use Photoshop, Picasa, iPhoto, whatever you have. Photoshop is what I use. If you have it, great. Maybe there's someone that you know that has access to it. But again, Picasa and iPhoto, you can adjust contrast and different lighting situations and a little bit of color, and it also has like a stamp or clone tool in case you do have one little spot that has a little bit of glare that you can just go and zinc and get it off. The main goal with editing your work is that you want your painting to look like the photo or the photo to represent your painting accurately. You don't want to make it look better or worse than it actually does in person. Make your photo look as close to the original artwork as possible and just follow guidelines for sizing and everything. And you can size your paintings and your files in all of those programs as well. When you're saving your file, just make sure you save it as maximum image quality. And then the final tip I have with editing is I will edit my paintings literally with my paintings right in front of me with the lighting that is appropriate that they'll be viewed in, or the lighting that I painted them in. So that's just going to help you get it as close as possible, and I know that I've had the best results that way. So that's it for my basic tips with photographing your work. I hope that this helps, and good luck!